Hey, everybody. It is I, Hope Giselle, and I am back with another episode of Can We Talk, the multimedia cast that you just cannot get enough of because we talk about real shit here. We talk about real shit with real people doing real things, and sometimes I have like my celebrity friends come on or whatever, but like for the most part, it's just regular people talking about regular shit. And today I have some of what I believe are my favorite hoes in the house. And when I say hoe with the Heaux, like sort of spelling in it, right? Not that it matters, but I wanted to come today to talk about sex. I wanted to come today and talk about sex with people who know sex really well because a lot of these folks are dealing in sex in ways that a lot of people deem to be unconventional. And myself at one time was one of those people. But today I wanted to come and just shed some light on some stuff, right? Some shit that we all need to be talking about because we're talking about it anyway. And without further ado, I wanted to introduce some of my folks: Delphine, India, and Molly. Hey, everybody.
What's up?
What is going on?
Hi.
So, first and foremost, thank y'all for participating today and like just being a part of this conversation. Um, because I think a lot of the conversations that I have around sex are usually like conversations where we feel like I have to be like police because of like my activism and like being thrown into these spaces where as an activist you cannot also be a sexual being, which I think is bullshit. Um, but I understand where it comes from. And then I stumbled into this clubhouse room with Molly and Delphine and like one other person. And then I also know India from like being a hopeful, being one of the people that like I'm always like interacting with on social media. And there was just so much dope conversation around sex and like how we healthily like maneuver it. So I wanted to just bring y'all on so that we can discuss sex in a healthy way. And I hope that we can help to educate some other people the way that I felt like I got education throughout the last couple of days and whatnot.
Absolutely.
I'm here for it. We also might have a couple of other people joining us throughout the cast. So if you hear some new voices or see some new faces, then just know that it's intentional. It's on purpose. Uh, so we actually have another one of our non-binary folks joining us, and it is going to be Cruel Valentine. They
Hi,
asked if I
everybody.
could say them. Hey, Cruel, what's going on, my love?
Not too much. My computer was freaking out, but we're good now.
It's all good. Like, first of all, everybody is a part of this Red Lip Club, and I'm just happy. I'm living for
I
it.
missed the memo.
You missed the memo. Like, everybody is like definitely down with the Red Lip Club, and I'm upset that like some of y'all just missed the memo. I should put that in the group chat. Um, but I want to like I think first and foremost, like I just want to jump straight into it, right? Sex work.
Let's
How
talk about it.
how do we feel about the way that sex work is one perceived, two demonized, and then three uplifted, right? So by certain communities. Like how do we feel about the demonization? How do we feel about the tokenization, right? Because when I say uplifted, I do mean like in that tokenized way. And then just how do we feel about it in general? And whoever wants to take the floor can definitely take it away.
Yeah.
So, oh, sorry, Molly, you can go ahead if you want.
Oh, just like basically as far as the first points about how's it like it does not good. You know, it's always negative. It's for jokes, or if somebody is hypersexual talking about, oh, you could be a porn terrible thing. Like, how could you see me like that? And so it's not great. It's a very, disdainful and sexist view, and it needs to change for sure.
I definitely agree.
So, one of the things that I like about that Clubhouse app that you mentioned is that we do get the chance to interact with people who haven't interacted with a sex worker before. And I think that what's great about that is that it really humanizes us. We're just people, whereas besides talking to sex workers, people just have the image of what is in the media, which is like Law and Order episodes and, scandals and all of that stuff. So, yeah, I like that about the app to humanize us.
Do you have anything you want to add, Valentine?
Yeah, I was just gonna say there are a lot of stereotypes that we deal with as sex workers, and it's very strange because we tend to be put to these two different poles. So we have the like super glamorized OnlyFans model who's making, 6 figures a month and is like a zillionaire, and then we have like poor, distraught on the street, a victim of circumstance who is like struggling through life. When the fact of the matter is that both ends of that spectrum very much exist, but we also have all of that in between to think about. So, yeah, like Clubhouse, like Delphine was saying, has been a really excellent instrument to engage in conversations about sex work and not about sex work, but also just representing the broad array of what sex workers look like and act like and backgrounds they come from and places they come from. So it's super rewarding for me for the most part.
I want to like throw a wrench in there and say, so I've been listening to Jasmine Sullivan's album, right? And I'm not sure if you all are fans or if you've heard about it, but the actual name of the album is called Hotels, but it's like a play on the word hoe with like, like fancy spelling, right? And there's a track on there where she has she has a couple of interlude tracks where they're just like a bunch of women just kind of like speaking their piece on different things. And one of the tracks is talking like, we get the track in the middle of like what seems to be a conversation. And so this particular track seems like we're interjected into a conversation around like being a hoe or sex work or tricking off with a guy. And this one woman, she takes the stance and she's just like, if you've ever like been in a relationship, you've been a hoe, like you've been a sex worker, like you've tricked, like you've done something. Because like a lot of us, especially if you're married, like you'll say things like, oh, like I want my husband to do X, Y, and Z, or I want my partner to do X, Y, and Z. And so I'm gonna fuck the shit out of them tonight, right? Because I know on the other end of that, like I'm gonna get something in return. And when she put it like that, and when she phrased it like that, so many of the women in the room were like, well, in that case, bitch, I've been hoeing since 1990 something. Like I've been doing X, Y, and Z since forever. And when I thought about it, just from my own point of view, what I realized is that I think a lot of us have engaged in what people on the outside would definitely deem as like hoe culture or things that hoes do, but it's only based on this idea that like, okay, because this is a thing that society looks as you are a hoe if you do X, Y, and Z under the sexual context for money, then I can't be a hoe because my husband is doing his job or my partner is doing their job. And it's just like, nah, babe, that's the same thing. Like there is still an exchange for service. There are still goods in exchange for a service. And so how do you all feel about that as folks who like actually identify as people who do engage with like people who you're not actually married to or might not actually be partnered with, as far as sex work goes? Like, how does that make y'all feel?
So like,
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Ultimately, I guess like you were saying, it is the same as far as like exchanging for service. Because ultimately, if you do have more than one like partner that you're in a relationship with, not technically married, that would be the same as if like I'm seeing someone getting something out of it and we exchange services from that. I see it to be the same.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, there's also a lot of like dialogue from men that, oh, if I like take you on a date and I pay this much money, aren't you gonna fuck me? So it's like men outside of the sex work world already have that type of connotation and idea about sex and money and like, quid pro quo type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So like, marriage has always been a business arrangement. I mean, going back to like, the Middle Ages or before that, it was like literally like, the husband, or the husband or whatever receives money, and it's like was for combining powerful families. And so like marriage has always been an arrangement of sorts. And even love marriages, I mean, I think a component of thinking about partnership is thinking about like, what does that person bring to the table? Like, are we going to have like what kind of life are we going to have together, and finances and work and all that stuff are like a part of that. And so I do think it is a bit different, but I do think that there are definitely similarities, basically.
Do you want to hear a quick story?
Yeah.
Okay, so a few years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I was hired as a panelist about sex work. The panel took place after a play that was about the placage system, which was a system of basically marrying out the blackness in Black families in the South, specifically like in Louisiana and especially New Orleans. So it was a play about that system, and we had a very lively Q&A after with some of the cast, and then a panel on sex work and how it tied to the themes of the play. So I'm really good at clearing a room of old white cis people, and I did not fail in that task this time because I straight up said, marriage is transactional, relationships are transactional, sex is transactional. It doesn't matter if you're, married for 50 years, like whether you're doing it to get them to take out the garbage or you're doing it because you want to feel loved or you want to feel warmth or you connected, like that's still value that you're getting. So there are a lot of double standards around like when it's okay to get something in exchange for sex. And it's a very strange symptom of how our society operates when everything else is so commercialized. It's very interesting that capitalizing on sex is so frowned on.
I really wonder what sex and relationships would be like outside of capitalism, because every relationship is kind of transactional in capitalism in a way. And yeah, I'm like, what else could there be in terms of love and relationships?
But that's the thing. I think that for me, especially as somebody who like doesn't necessarily engage in sex for the art of like, money or transaction on like this very, I guess, traditional scale, I definitely understand where the premise comes from, where it's just like everything is an arrangement based on a transaction, right? So when I'm having sex, even when what I receive for the transaction is gratification or sexual pleasure or like the need for warmth or like the need to be filled or whatever the case that I might have for that day, it's all transaction. And so it does like beg the question, Delphine, like what does it look like without like this hierarchy sort of thing put behind it, and what does it look like when it is just done for the primal nature that two people want to have sex, right? And I think that like really, that's a question that a lot of people cringe about, because people want to always make sex this like beautiful, unbounding, unfathomable, like this activity, or they want to solely like turn it down to this thing that doesn't involve emotions. It doesn't, like, it's this disconnected vibe that I get paid for. And I think that sex has to be somewhere in the middle, right? Even if I'm doing these things for transactional value, I want to be respected. I want to feel safe. I want to enjoy it, right? Does it mean that I always will? Absolutely not. But these are things that I go into this situation feeling, as well as wanting whatever the fuck it is that I want at the end of the act. And so I think the reason that you make those people uncomfortable, Valentine, is because when they think about the idea that, you know what, there are times, and there are plenty of times when my sex has been transactional because I wanted something, whether it be money, whether it be a trip to whatever, whether it be those new pair of Chanel slides, right? I have engaged in this thing that is super transactional, but because like e-commerce has taught us to see these things as like these valuable, loving moments, you don't want anybody to challenge that, because it challenges the way that you think about your love, right? And it shouldn't, because that does, like, the fact of the matter is that the truth about the nature of relationships, sex, and marriage does not change the way that you feel about your partner, right? You just have to be able to understand and know that there is like a commerce side of this entire thing, that somebody is benefiting off of this monetarily, even if it is not you and your partner.
Absolutely. No, that's a really good point. It reminds me of something we were talking about in a different Clubhouse group the other day about how, trafficking versus sex work. And then someone said, like, we're all coerced to work under capitalism. And so it's like there's a lot of things that happen that are just, yeah, things have to be transactional because we have to survive and pay our bills and eat food. And yeah.
There's some discourse on the left, like within like socialist and communist communities, where people who are anti-sex work would like love to argue that, oh, like after the revolution or like in a communist or socialist society, like people won't need sex work. And I actually don't think that's true, because people are always, no matter what the economic system is, people are always going to need companionship, pleasure, and everything else that sex work can provide. What do you guys think about that?
It goes back to what you're saying about the idea of like this animalistic primal sort of nature behind sex, right? Like what happens, and I think it really goes back to your initial question, Delphine, is like what happens when we are just having sex because people like each other, right? Like what happens when we are simply having sex to engage in each other's bodies, and not for like all of these other things, right? Like what happens when it's just because I like you and I want to lay with you and I want you to touch me and I want to be able to touch you. And so I think that when we do, or if we were to be able to like strip sex of all of these things and like all of these requirements, and as one of my exes would call it, these expectations, right? I really think that people would be able to enjoy it, one, a lot more, and two, enjoy it without shame, right? So that's where this whole idea of like being a sex worker becomes this negative connotation. And I think that that helps us to like really segue into the next portion of like what I wanted to talk about, which is like the negativity around sex work. Like, how have you all either like experienced it, if you've experienced it, or like did you on a daily, or while maneuvering through your career, like how does that show up for you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, for example, like I don't talk to my mom or my brother anymore because they were not able to be accepting or even open. It's not like they had to accept it, but just be like, well, Molly does that, and it was just, there's so much negativity and just assumptions about it that for me, I had to cut some people out of my life, which, had I not been a sex worker, that wouldn't be the case, right? So, definitely see that a lot with people that are sex workers, don't really have relations with their biological families because people don't understand. And then just as far as like navigating in the world, when I was in college about a year and a half ago, it's hard because there's so much stigma and prejudice about sex work that even though I wasn't around children, it's like still I was so worried someone was going to find out and like out me or something.
I have a confession.
What is it?
So I don't even know how I want to place this. Okay. So the guy who I was involved with last had to make a decision, and the decision that he chose to make was heavily founded by the fact that this other girl was fun, right? Like Hope is the structured person, and not like fun as in like, oh, because she is whatever, she's fun, but like just because legitimately like I am like super structured, even though I know how to have fun. Like a large portion of my life is like figuring this shit out, because like as an adult, who has to adult by themselves, right? With very little help. Like I don't have a lot of time to just like spend my life smoking or drinking or whatever. Like it's fun every once in a while, but for the most part, like I'm scared shitless as a Black trans woman to just be out here coasting, right? And so this other girl happened to be a sex worker via OnlyFans and I think some other stuff. And I knew about this. And so when the shit hit the fan with me and him, I remember like specifically like making the statement and saying like, I can't believe you're like choosing. I can't believe it's even a fucking choice that like you have like a sex worker and then me. Like she does fucking OnlyFans. Like I remember saying that like at the height of my anger and just being like, really? Are you serious? Like she does OnlyFans, like as if that was like the reason that she shouldn't be considered for his time or his attention or his love or like companionship. And eventually, because he pulled the fuck nigga move, he told her what I said to him in confidence. And the thing about it was at the most inopportune time, but it was also the best time because I felt shitty because I should have felt shitty. I reached out to her in an act of compassion because some stuff had happened, and to my surprise, she was actually really like accommodating and like super understanding and being like, yeah, like I completely understand. I'm not trying to hurt you on purpose. Like, you know, I completely get it. So much so, like after everything went down, like I remember he told me like she called him and like went off on him about like everything like in my defense. But then she found out the things that I said, and like literally it was like a smack in the face because I was like, in this moment where this girl like had so much compassion for me and she had so much care about my feelings, even though she didn't have to, right? Here it was like I had said all of these things about her, and even though I hadn't like said it on a public platform or whatever the case may be, like when she confronted me with my actions and like what I said about her, it was from a place of like, damn, like I thought that you like advocated for people like me, and I thought that you were like on my side, and I thought that, and like a part of me wanted to combat it with, well, like I was mad, like I was upset, like I was in my feelings and I shouldn't have said it, but I said it, and it was just like, that's not good enough, you know. And like for me, even in my anger, like I realized it now, and I realized it like very shortly after, you know, being confronted with it, that I wasn't upset with her for her sex work. I didn't feel those ways about sex workers. Like I could care less. A lot of my friends, because we are trans women, are sex workers, right? But it's one of those things where I allowed my social identity to attack the one thing that I knew that I had a leg up on her, right? Like I couldn't be like, oh, you're trans because I'm trans, right? But I could say, you're a sex worker. You do OnlyFans. Like, how dare you? Like, how dare he put me up against you? Like, who are you? And so there is this like social idea that like, if you don't do sex work, that you are better, or that there's something about you that is better and that deserves more, right? And that's just simply not true. And so has that ever shown up for you all, like in intimate relationships or friendships where like, you know, a person who you know like cares for you has like had one of those moments where, because of like the things that have been ingrained in them, have like said things or done things that like were kind of hard to forgive them for?
Yes, definitely. And especially like relating to like the type of sex work that it is. And I also had one situation that was kind of in a way similar to what you were talking about, but basically I was dating someone and they also kind of were like in the make a choice phase, and they chose the other person, and I didn't really fully get to know why, and like just where my mind kept going to was like, oh, it's because I'm a sex worker, and this person was like super together, professional kind of person, you know. And but yeah, I've definitely had other things with friends who I absolutely know love me, and in these situations like we're trying to have my best interest at heart, but said like really hurtful things, or, you know, violated my trust by telling other people things I had told them about my work, or just, you know, things like that. And it's like, it's even been from other sex workers of different types of sex work, because it's kind of like, you know, if someone's like just doing OnlyFans, like a lot of times they think they're better than people who are escorts or pro doms. And so even within the sex work industry, that kind of stuff can happen.
Oh yeah, like there's an example that I always think about. My ex-best friend, like this is someone I was friends with since we were 13 years old. So I actually met her husband in a very weird way before they were married. You know, basically, I'm not going to get too much into it, but there's Sesta Fosta, which are these things that were passed that really fucked with sex workers, and it took away Backpage and took away like Craigslist personals. So I met this guy on Craigslist personals, like do a random hookup thing, and I introduced him to my best friend because like he wasn't for me. We all like hung out and smoked weed and just had a good time. And I remember he said something to me because he knew I did sex work. And he's like, like no guy is ever going to want to like settle down with you and date you because of the type of lifestyle you live. And it was so contradictory and so hypocritical because he met me like that, So he's like, it was just basically all you are is like a worthless sex object. And it was just very like, wow, just people's true colors can be really messed up.
India, do you have any, because I'm pretty sure the stigma around like trans sex workers is probably like really heavy too.
Oh, for me, I was involved with this guy, and I used to like post ads on stuff on different websites. And whenever I get into a relationship, my sex work kind of like dies down, or like I just don't do it at all. But I guess he like found one of my ads or was like into that, or I don't know, because he denied everything. But he pretty much came at me and was like, hey, like asking me if I did that. And like when I'm in a relationship, I don't really disclose my past because they do judge me, and then they, I feel like my value goes down, or they see my value go down and treat me accordingly. But so I'm very careful with disclosing my past, but I did tell him no. And then he showed me my ad, and so I did confess then. But ever since like I confessed, he was down my neck and like always just like on edge about me like getting back into it, or just like judging me, or just like the way he moved even after that conversation was different, and I could tell. But then when I found out he was cheating on me with someone who I knew, an old friend who I used to actually do sex work with, it kind of like made me confused, because it's like you're holding me to this standard while we're in a relationship and you know my past, but like you're cheating on me with another sex worker. So
Mm.
yeah.
That's so frustrating.
Yeah, that really sucks.
And so yeah, sorry, Hope, I didn't mean to.
No, I was gonna say I can only imagine.
Yeah, and then so he did choose the other person, but it was like, for me, like, why go to the lengths of trying to be in this like committed, serious relationship? Like, I went on trips and he'd come like show up and like drop things off at my house, and just like, like just like he would just drag it on, and I was like, I don't understand why. But...
So do you all think that your careers have hindered for I guess what we can consider like actual like loving, and I guess what people would form as like normal relationships? Or do you think that you've been able to still like formulate and have substantial relationships while still being a sex worker?
Well, I am in a long-term relationship. I'm married, and I got with my partner before I started doing sex work, and I'm very, very fortunate that he's super supportive and amazing. And the only other person that I've dated in the time, like in any like long-term capacity, in the time that I've done sex work, has also been very supportive. It's really hard dating as a polyamorous person, because I think being polyamorous, people already have some assumptions about like what you'll do or what you'll want to do or what you're expected to do, especially like on a first date or whatever. But then when you disclose like, oh, like I'm a sex worker, I do X, Y, and Z, then it becomes this like either like, oh, I don't know if I can handle that, or they like hyper fetishize you for it and don't take you seriously. So I can relate to it. I'm very fortunate. Like it's 1,000,000 to 1 that I ended up with partners that get it and are like, oh, you want to do that? That's cool. Like I support you. But yeah, I've definitely seen, sort of the mental gymnastics that people play when they're like starting to date you, or like even just the way they like talk to you on a dating app or in person or whatever when they find out. So that's that's something that's really frustrating. Like I'm bumbling right now and it's the fucking worst. But yeah, there are people out there who support us and aren't really qualified to date us. And there are people who think they want to date us and are not qualified to do that, because they don't really support us as sex workers and as whole people. They don't see us holistically, which is frustrating. But yeah, it means when you find someone that you click with and that gets it, like they tend to really get it, and they tend to really get other stuff too, like adjacent, like marginalization stuff. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, that's awesome though. And like similarly, like I am also very lucky. I have a partner that I've been with for like 10 years. So basically as long as I've been a sex worker, I'm also polyamorous. And he met me when I was first just doing online sex work. So he has had a transition into like me being a full service sex work and doing in person. And that was a little hard for him. Just like he was worried about, you know, me being safe, yada, yada. So he did have to kind of work through some things in that regard. But I mean, he's been very supportive and very like, you know, he's a person of color. So I think it sometimes helps to have like a different lens, you know, because I've dated a lot of white men that are more so like they think it's hot or cool, you know, but they don't really like get it. But yeah, there are some really rare, awesome people that understand it. I've also dated a lot of like femme sex workers. I think that just kind of happens like that. Females, at least in my opinion, or women that are civilians, it's really hard to have a relationship with, but that's just my take.
Yeah, I was gonna say I like that. I want to unpack a little bit more on that, Molly. But go ahead, Delphine.
I was just gonna say, for me, I am single, and the thing about doing in-person sex work is that honestly, I get treated so well by my clients. It's like, why would I put up with people who like don't text me back, who like cancel on dates, who like, you know, don't act like they appreciate me or want to be around me when my life is like pretty full of people who act that way towards me. And you know, it is a business, but also like I have like intimate relationships with many of my clients that I really appreciate that we can have that in the container of this like profession, you know. So it has changed dating for me, but I'm not like sitting at home being like, oh, like I wish I had a partner. Like I would like to have a partner at some point, but I'm not at this point willing to just like put up with the normal dating stuff, because I just feel like I know my worth now through doing this, you know.
It's really funny because I'm really good friends with Yes Madison, and her mantra around like the reason that she feels like she's just not going to settle down ever is because she's like, Hope, as a sex worker, as she self-proclaimed, she's an old hoe, right? And she's just like, you know, as somebody who has seen a lot of these men, like, one, they do treat you well, right? It's like, you know, they treat you like a queen, like a goddess, like you're the only person that matters. And your voice is the only thing that matters, and like you're the most beautiful thing, and blah 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 blah. But she's like, on the flip side of that, like I've also like been there where I've just blown a guy, right? Or I've just had sex with him and like another person, or like, you know, me and my friend just ran a train on this person, and then like in the middle of the train his wife will call and he'll be like, baby, I love you, I'm gonna be home. And she's just like, why? Like she's like, you know, as sex workers sometimes we do see like the worst parts of these people while being treated, you know, like the best thing in their life. And it's just like, when I know what they're capable of, like, it's not even about the fact that I don't necessarily think I can be in a relationship as a sex worker, but it's like, why would I want to when I know that like this is what they could be doing to me, you know? Like, and I think that that's the thing that that's a thing that scares me in a lot of spaces, because I think I'm typically very open, especially because I'm into kink. But that's something that I don't typically share that side of myself until I know somebody's going to really be around, because I definitely understand the idea of what Valentine was saying when you like disclose sometimes, and then all of a sudden it's just like either they can really deal with the fact that like you're into kink, or it's like, ooh, like tie me up right now, like or it's like, oh, I can't, like I don't want anything to do with this. And while it's not sex work, I think that there are so many things that are tied to sex that are like really taboo. People really don't want to talk about them, and they're either super for them or super against them. But sometimes when you get a chance as a person who is having an intimate relationship, like you mentioned, Delphine, like whether it's like intimacy, you are getting to know somebody in a way that other people are not privy to. And so it is definitely intimate, right? And so when you get to know those people in those spaces and they start to trust you and you kind of start to see who they really are, sometimes you don't even like, it's like, I agree with what Delphine is saying. Like, I feel like if I was engaging in sex work, I probably would not be the hopeless romantic that I am. But because I am so blind to some of the things that are happening behind the scenes, I think that that's the reason that I'm able to maintain like my willful, like Snow White opinion about love, because I don't have to like deal with like what Madison was saying, where it's like, oh, I'm blowing a guy and he's literally on the phone with his wife, like, yeah, I'm coming home, hun. Like, you know, so I don't know. That's like a whole thing. But
no, totally. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I thought you were finished. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say like that brings me to like the point about like misconceptions about sex workers, like not knowing how to take care of themselves, right? Like, or not knowing their worth and not knowing like the value of themselves. Is like, oh, well, you're giving yourself away, so you don't know how much you're worth. Like, you're a person. And it's like, well, actually I do, and there's a number value attached to that, right? And so it's just like, on top of those things, it's like when people talk about like sexual health and the fact that like sex workers are constantly putting themselves at risk of sex, like how do you all feel about the idea that folks think that sexually a lot of sex workers are dirty? Ooh, we got quiet.
So I'll say this, which is that in my experience, sex workers are on top of their sexual health way more than anyone else I know. I mean, sex workers get tested for STDs all the time. Like, if you're hooking up with some random person from Tinder, like, what have they been doing? Are they tested? How often do they get tested? Are they telling you the truth? Like, you know, I don't know. That's just my experience, is that sex workers really care about their sexual health a lot.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if I had $1 for every time a male client has told me that they're clean, but then also didn't know the last time they got tested for STIs, that I wouldn't have to work, because they don't literally understand how it works. They just assume, oh, like, I don't have an STI because I don't feel anything. But I like know so many men who like they haven't, or even, I mean, also civilian women, not just men, that like never think about that. You know, it's just wild.
Yeah, I was also gonna bring up, I don't know if y'all have like acquaintances who know that you're a sex worker, but they're not necessarily someone who's like super close to you, who like really gets it. But if you mention you're like going to do something, they'll be like, be safe. It's the fucking worst. I'm like, I'm good. Like, if I weren't good, I would ask someone for assistance or something, and it probably wouldn't be you. But yeah, exactly. Like, I know my worth, and I can put a dollar amount on that or not. And meanwhile, a lot of people are out here, you know, fucking for emojis back. So I can't. Like, no.
India, that you were like a comment. Do you have something that you wanted to add to that?
I would just have to agree with what the rest of them said. I am definitely on top of my health, my hygiene, my STD, STI, everything status. So yeah, I just think when people think that we're like these dirty creatures, I literally laugh, because it's like, no, not me.
Dirty and naive and just unable to take care of yourself in any way, shape, or form. It's so bizarre to me.
Right.
It was the shade for me that Valentine threw. I'm still like trying to catch my edges off of that. Like, it was the complete palm tree of like shade. Like, I love it. I love it. I'm like so here for it. Especially because I definitely agree with Molly. Like, there are so many times where like just because like stigma behind being a Black trans woman on dating apps, right? So like, if I disclose my transness, then it's like there's an automatic assumption that I'm a sex worker. Like I have to be because I'm a Black trans woman on a dating app. And then there's like this automatic assumption that I don't know my status, that I'm not clean. And so, like, before I even get a chance to respond, it's like, we can have sex, but I'm going to bring condoms just so you know. It's nothing personal, but I know how y'all get down. And mind you, all I've done was disclose, right? Like, I haven't said anything except for I'm transgender. Is that okay with you? And it's just like, oh, so you're a sex worker. Okay. And then on top, like, there's this whole dialogue that happens with himself before I even get a chance to respond to anything. And it's just like, the idea that folks think that sex workers are disgusting and nasty and all of these other vibes are just like horrible. Like, I think for me, I definitely know it to be true. Like what Delphine was saying, like a lot of the sex workers that I know are often getting tested. My only issue where I think I still fall in like civilian problematic politics is I don't judge the career, but I do tend to sometimes judge the person, right? If I look at somebody that I know that does sex work and they tend to be like a party person who I know is always doing drugs, who I know is always inebriated, who I know is usually not kind of sort of in control of their own body and like what they're really doing. And they're like always at some rave or some party, or, you know, like every time you see them, like they're just like having a good time. Sometimes I do think that I judge those people and what they might be doing as far as their sexual health, because I'm just not sure if you're ever sober enough to actually give a shit about what's happening, right? Because you're always having a good time. So I don't think that that's necessarily about me judging the career path. It's more so about me like making assumptions about the person based on their lifestyle and not what they do for work.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Like here where I'm at in Portland, there's a like hobby board for full service sex work. And we've done like some meetups, you know, like meeting up with like providers and hobbyists. And so I met some of those like party girl type of providers. And yeah, I know that we're like sharing the same client pool. And I think about that same type of stuff as well. So yeah, for sure. I mean, it is something that is just a part of the work, you know.
I will say that kind of in relation to this, that there are some clients who are very paranoid about sexual health. And it is true that anytime you have a sexual experience outside of like masturbation or monogamy, there's some level of risk. And if you're going to have sex, you have to accept that there is always going to be a small level of risk. And there are things you can do to mitigate that risk, like getting tested, you know, examining the stuff, using protective things like condoms or dental dams and all that stuff. But there always is like some small level of risk.
I love how Delphine said examining the stuff. It was just like, make sure you look, because literally every single time somebody does that, like I go to these binary understandings of like people's private parts, and like all I see is myself like lifting up a penis, up labial lips, like just like, okay, I'm examining the stuff as told by Delphine. Okay, just
I mean, just look at it and just see if it looks good, you know?
I love, speaking of looks, right? What are some of, because I intended, and I'm actually really happy that I didn't, because I've been overdressed, but I had every intention to like get in one of my sexiest little like tops, because people can only see us from the top up. If you're listening to this on the podcast, then you're missing a good look, because we look cute. But I had every intention to like put on one of my cute little, like I like to call them like my sexy fits. So as sex workers, like, do you all engage in like the idea of like getting into like a persona or a character, and like
absolutely,
like, what are some of your favorite outfits to put on?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Okay, so India, let's hear it. Describe to us what this outfit looks like and who this character is.
My outfit consists of clear heels. I like a mesh see-through piece, preferably like a onesie, rhinestones, full face of makeup, depending on the client. You know, I'll smell good and like my hygiene will be up to par. You know, some of them are going home to their wives, so they don't like that. So yeah, I get in full character mode. I feel way more empowered when I do, so I love it.
Oh, okay. See, I didn't even think about the fact that like you have to think about smelling good because like you don't want to leave your scent on them because I would get so many men caught up because I am good for like I have to smell like I
Me
like
too, yes. And I'll set the room, everything, like everything. There's candles. Like I literally make it a whole experience because you know, like I'm not a cheap, you know, so you're gonna get what you pay for. So I try and, go the whole 9 yards, but some of them will be like, okay, hold off on this, 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 and this, because I am going home to my wife, and I'm like, okay. So
Definitely.
that is dope. Okay, so what other outfits? Because I know that first of all, I'm really excited to hear what Valentine has to say. They look like they get a whole load of like things, and I need to know what that looks like over there.
Well, I come from a performance background. Before I started doing sex work, I started in burlesque and met people who were in sex work through burlesque. So I still perform burlesque, more so when it's not a whole panty out. But yeah, I wear a little bit of everything. But my character, like as far as how I behave and everything, it's very much me. I don't know. I went to school for acting and all of this, but I really don't feel like I put on a persona. I feel like I'm myself amplified, if that makes sense. But yeah, I will wear anything. I'm really lucky that I have a lot of clients who are like I just want to see you be you, so wear whatever you want. And sometimes, that's like just a cute tank top and like some panties, or other times it's like a whole like this.
Oh yeah, see, there's a whole situation. I knew it. I knew it.
I had to get a little booby out, just a little.
Look, and I was gonna do a whole moment. It was gonna be a whole moment for life here, and then like I don't know why I took it off. Well, it was actually uncomfortable because I don't wear it that often. It's like one of those things that I put on to take off, and like it took me too long because I did my makeup like an hour and a half ago, and I was like, girl, I gotta come up out of it.
I will say one thing really quick. I hate wearing heels. Like I will wear them if I'm like sitting still, but I hate wearing them out and about. So I'm usually very much like a combat boot bitch.
Can I just say you're so lucky because they literally are like hyper feminine for me all the time. Like that's what they want to come to. And I wish I could just, like see a client and not have to throw on makeup or do my hair, go like the extra 9 miles that I would for myself for this man, but
Doming helps. I'm like, you don't tell me what to do. Like I'm gonna wear my Doc Martens or like my combat boots or whatever bullshit I want, and you can't say anything about it. Damn it! I'm old and my knees hurt. Leave me alone.
Like I've seen pictures of both Molly and Delphine, so I kind of like both of your styles like sort of similar. Like it's very boudoir-esque, so it's like very simple but not like
the way that I describe my style. So kind of like what you're saying, Hope, about like how we get to see the best of our clients. Like I feel like for me, Delphine is like the best parts of me, and so it's like when I'm at home, I'm like wearing like leggings and a sweatshirt, and then when I'm like doing this, I describe my style as like it's like modest but sexy. It's like a simple like t-shirt dress. I don't really like to wear like anything that's like too revealing. I like to be a little mysterious, but then also there's like the lingerie and the makeup that I don't always wear when I'm just on my own. And yeah, I also love pinup style, as you may have seen.
Even today, like for those of you all who are just listening and won't get a chance to watch this, it's definitely like a light pinup moment over there right now. Right. And like Molly, like you give all of the life. And like, people are gonna watch this, they're gonna be like, really? No, like y'all have to like tune in to Molly's like stuff, because Molly gives like, when I first went through your page, I was like, oh my God, like this is you put a lot of what I see like energy for like your shoots and like your overall look. And so like what takes you from like just like regular down home like by yourself right now into that mood? Like, is there something that you do to set that for yourself?
I mean, first of all, I definitely like resonate with what Cruel said regarding like I'm me, like Molly is me, just like kind of amped up. And a lot of my branding is like I'm a slut, like I'm like slut on the go is a lot of my whole deal. So I think I kind of lean into the whole like trampy, trashy type of thing sometimes, slutty. And just kind of I have like certain playlists and music, you know, that definitely get me into that zone. And, you know, yeah, I think it's kind of like a mindset. Like I kind of have my like work playlists that really help with that. And I'll usually put like a lot of makeup, like a lot of lipstick and like heavy mascara. But yeah, I think it's like kind of a part like playing dress up a little bit, but it's still me for sure. But it's like, you know, dialed up.
Molly. Molly, I was just gonna say, if you could make slut on the go shirts, I would buy like 10 of them.
I said that I was in my mind. I was like, that's like
that'd be my like tour travel outfit.
Yes,
I love that slut on the go. I'm like that.
Yes. I just wanted to say also that for me, there's a difference between online sex work and in-person sex work. Like what I was talking about is more for in-person work, and then online, you know, I'm trying to be creative and do like cosplays, and obviously I'm showing a lot more and not being very mysterious at all. So just wanted to make that distinction.
See, if I could, I don't think that I could be a sex worker. My attitude, I don't think that like I have the patience for clients. And like I think that from just like from what I've heard, the patience that you have to have with some of these clients,
oh yeah,
like unabound. And while I have a lot of patience for bigotry and shit like that, I don't have patience for people who think that they can say or do whatever because they're paying me. Especially if I don't the money. Like for me, I think it's one of those like the everybody hates Chris montage where it's like my husband has 2 jobs, I don't need this, and like even though that's not my life, like in the back of my mind I'm like, bitch, I got 2 degrees, like, and if I really want to I can go back to corporate, like don't play with me, like I don't your bullshit. And so I think that that's the thing that keeps me from doing, you know, the curiosity has killed the cat, but like it never gets past the messages. I'm always like, oh, you're a creep, or you're a misogynist, or you're an asshole, or you're a fetishist, like, and before I know it, like moral Sally comes out of my mind and she's just like, you know what, bitch, close the laptop. This is over. Like, I just can't do it. But if I had to, if I had to, I think that my thing would be red. I don't like red on a regular basis. I don't typically care for wearing it. The most that you're going to get out of me is a red lipstick. But I feel like if I had to do sex work, my name would be Carmen, just because I love the opera, and if you know about it, or you know that's a whole thing. And so I think that I would always be in red. Like there would always be something red socks, red bra, red panties, red lingerie. Like even if it's a casual meetup, like everything would just kind of like be red or have some hint of red to it. I would have a bunch of like different styles of red wigs. Like there would be a whole thing about like this red sex kink kitten that I would put on, type of person. I think that would be just like my thing. I agree with India though. I feel like, you know, there's this thing about trans women where like, especially clients are probably going to be mostly men, because even though I don't do sex work, like even when I was engaging in hookup culture, like in the very beginning stages of my transition, guys, like there was like this force of like, so are you going to have on makeup when I come over? Are you going to have on heels when I come over? Is your hair going to be done? Do you look like your picture right now? Well, if you don't look like your picture because you look like your picture by the time I get there, like there's all of these demands for hyper femininity. And even when I'm talking to like my sex work friends now who are cisgender, there is like not that much pressure on kind of like showing up in that way, kind of like what Valentine was saying. Like, even though they're non-binary, there's like not this like pressure to be like, well, you have to put on makeup by the time I get there. Whereas like I've learned with a lot of my trans girls who are in a sex work and doing the jobs, there is like this pressure where guys will like literally tell them everything that they want them to put on down to the lashes. Like, and it's kind of crazy. Like it's a little like obsessive, like manic obsessive. So I think that's another thing that like would keep me from doing it, is that I just don't like being told what to do by somebody simply because they're paying me, right? Like, not because like you want this like as a sexual thing, like it's your kink or it's what you're into, but like I think that it's a difference when I know that you're telling me this because you're just like, I'm paying you, have to, you know. I don't know if y'all get it, but like I think that's the thing about sex work that bothers me.
Well, first of all, I'm sorry you've had those experiences. That's like a lot to ask someone, and that really sucks. I'm sorry about that. And second of all, for me personally, I mean, I do have a more kind of like dominant persona, not even in a kink way. I mean, when I do kink sessions, I am dominant, but I don't like take outfit requests. I don't like, and that's honestly a privilege on my end. You know, to be able to say no to those people is a huge privilege. And I don't really deal with people who try to strong arm me into doing stuff. And that's also a privilege. That I can say no to people is a huge privilege. And so for me personally, those things are not a big issue, but that is a big privilege for sure. And in part due to my own privilege.
Yeah, I really agree with what Hope you said at the beginning about just how some men will think like I can pay for anything. You know, they'll ask about certain services and like, oh, well, you'll do it if I pay for this much. And that's a very dangerous and scary part of this world. And why I think I was talking to Delphine about this recently, about how it's like kind of worrisome to get like really rich clients, because sometimes they have that mentality like anything is negotiable or anything is possible, and it's kind of scary. Yeah.
I think that would scare me too. Like sometimes like the idea of thinking about somebody who has money and has this disposable income to give it to you, like it sounds good on the surface, but then when you think about the idea that they're used to in every other portion of their life paying their way out, right? Like from everything to the sold out shoe at the department store to, you know, a DUI, right? And so why not something as simple as sex from a sex worker? Like, why would that be out of my league? Like, how dare you? And I think that those are the things that I think about that don't scare me away from sex work, but those are the things that, like, because of my attitude, like, I'm just annoyed. Like, I'm automatically annoyed. And I've never even been through it, but, like, I just know, like, just from my conversations where I was just like, I'm going to try to maybe see. And then, like, before the conversation even gets started, it's over. And I'm like, okay, yeah, no, this is not for me. I could never.
Yeah.
No, I literally had someone be like, oh, you're like, so how much is your like dominant rate? And I was like, X. And they were like, oh, okay, would you like be submissive for like X like amount of money? That was like, you know, several times more than my dominant rate. And I was like, I had at the time the privilege to be like, no, because I really don't want to do that. Like people will just throw it out there and see what sticks sometimes, you know?
I first of all, I think that what a lot of people don't realize is that as sex workers, there is the privilege to say no, but only when you have like that security behind it. Like I even think about like the thing earlier where I'm just like, well, I got 2 degrees, bitch. Like I don't need this. Like if I just got off my ass and like went and did an application or 2, like I can get something. But like there are certain times in certain situations where like even like you acknowledging like Delphine, like because of the way that I show up in the world, like that's another privilege, like where sometimes people just don't ask me and I know why they're not asking me. I think India, because I don't know about anyone else on panel, but if I am missing somebody who is another person of color, then please feel free to answer this question as well. But India, I know that you're of color. Have you had anything where you felt like something was happening specifically because you were a person of color, or like a part of a marginalized community, and not just because you were a sex worker? Like, have you ever had a client like ask you something simply because you were like Hispanic?
I've had them like overly fetishize me, or like I literally can't speak Spanish and they'll ask me to speak Spanish, or like this doesn't really have anything to do with that, but I would see this regular, and we like built a really like good bond. He would like come and like stay later, and like like we just built a great bond. And then one day after we exchanged services, he asked me if I could give him advice on his friend's son who just came out as trans. He was a white man. His friend's son is also white. But the thing was about that, he could not wrap his mind around why his friend was accepting his son. And so I'm like sitting here listening to him rant about how he thinks his friend would be a certain way, and how he thinks his friend should raise his son, and like all his like negative, ideals on how like a child shouldn't be trans, or shouldn't even like get the choice to identify that way, because it's a disorder, it's a disease, it's I'm sitting here listening to him say this after we just got done, servicing each other, and I'm like, I couldn't help but to think, okay, well, sex work couldn't be it, because you just slept with me. So is it because I'm a Black trans woman? Like what? Like, like that it made it okay? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I just felt extra fetishized in that moment. If you can understand what I'm saying.
No, I definitely get it, because I've actually had a situation like that. There was a guy from college who, like, after I graduated, y'all know how they do after you graduate.
Oh, high school is a mess.
As for you're on, we all have those fucking jerks. Like, after you graduate, all of a sudden you're so fucking hot, right? But anyway, so like there was this guy, I graduated college, and he hits me up, but he hit me up in a way, because usually like I curve them, block them, pay them no mind, but he hit me up in a way that I felt was different. He came at me very subtly over like the course of a couple of months. He was really patient. And so he started off with like liking things publicly, and then like he would like comment on a story, but the story goes into like your inbox, right? It's not like, a regular comment. It turns into a message. And like the messages were never like these forward, like, oh, in college you were so fine, but I was, on the DL or whatever. And so like he worked his way through. And so eventually we've never actually hooked up. Like we've exchanged like pictures and things like that. But I also, I'm the queen of like the no trade zone, or the no DL guy zone. And I preach that to all my little baby trans girls. I'm just like, don't do it, girl. Don't. And I will never forget, he has a son, and he is enthralled with me. Like, he makes it very clear that like he is enthralled with me. He loves my body. I've seen some of the trans porn that he engages in and that he likes, and I have to check my own transphobia and trans negativity, because some of that stuff that he likes, I'm like, really? And I think that I put a poll on my story one day or something of that nature. And I just remember asking him, I was like, hey, so, oh no, I do remember what it was about. It was about the Zaya Wade situation, when all of that debacle was going on with Dwayne Wade and Gabrielle Union and all of that. And I remember asking him, I was like, so if your son, decided that they wanted to embrace the fact that actually, you know what, I'm trans, would you, like, how would you feel about that? And his response floored me, because as somebody who was always in my inbox, as somebody who was like always wanting to talk to me and like all of the things, he said to me, I don't want to raise my son the wrong way. I don't want him to think that it's okay, because it is not okay to be like that. And so I don't want to raise him the wrong way. And I said, okay, well, rephrase the question. Let's just say your son was like you, and he was also attracted to trans women, and you found out, this world is changing. So these kids are not going to be hiding that anymore. I was like, he's just going to bring his trans girlfriend home, and she's going to be trans. And what do you do then? And he's just like, I'm not accepting that. As you're talking to me, before we started that conversation, we were having a conversation about your particular attraction to me, a trans woman. But you're telling me that you wouldn't accept the fact that your son was open about his attraction to trans women. And I think that it's really crazy to me sometimes the way that they like don't equate the two. Like they just don't understand that like the same thing that they're condemning is the same thing that they are engaging in that moment. And I think that like probably for sex workers, it's probably the same thing. Like if you were to ask some of them like, oh, like how would you feel if like your daughter became a sex worker or, you know, your kid like became a sex worker? And like they probably say some shit like, oh, not my daughter, not my baby girl. Like, you know, like even when we have like the stripper conversation, like, oh, not my baby girl up on the pole, you know, whatever. But it's just like, but you're literally in a strip club watching someone else's baby girl on this pole. Like I just, for the life of me, I don't get it, because I think oftentimes women and mothers and femmes, like we get it. Like we're just kind of like, you know what? While I might not like it, it's not going to be something that I can condemn, right? But I think that men and mask folks, they just forget. Like they, like I don't know what like part of their brain tells them to be like, fuck that, like,
Yeah.
and go with chaos that day, but they always do, and I've never understood it. Never.
So yeah, it's weird. I don't know if any of you ever watched that show 30 Rock, but like Tracy Jordan has a character who's like, oh, you're like the stripper, like you're someone's daughter. Like they like don't understand. Like, you know, it's just like I think some of them don't put the two and two together, that they think that sex workers, strippers like are born in some egg, you know, or something. It's really fucking weird.
I think it plays into men's instinct to just victimize women also, and like, you know, like the whole trope of like daddy issues and things like that. It's like, okay, so you think this person was like raised wrong and had some sort of horrible broken childhood, so that's why it's okay for you to engage in this thing that you don't believe is like okay. So you're like victimizing this person further, who you think is already broken or whatever. Sorry, I live near a hospital. It's good to know the ambulances are like ready if I need them. Yeah, so it's just like, it's just this weird like cognitive dissonance that is extremely frustrating to see.
It is. And I think that women and men's perspectives are meant to be subservient and like be available. I think some men would just think that we should just be like open holes ready for them. And the fact that we're taking control and we're charging for that, they're like, wait, no, I don't like that.
But I'm entitled to that. What?
Yeah, exactly.
I agree. Like, oh my God, I could talk to you forever about this, but our time is coming for our end. So I want to ask the folks who have come and genuinely, you know, given us like your time and your opinions and like your thoughts about things. What is something that you want to leave the people with, like on a sex positive, sex worker, pro ho kind of note? Like if you could just say anything to a person right now who has like been spewing hate for the last like 30 minutes, right? And you just want to leave them with something positive about you, your existence, and your career path, what would it be? And I am going to start with Delphine. That's the first person that's on my screen.
I would say that someone that you know is probably a sex worker. There are a lot of sex workers of all different types. There's so many different ways to be a sex worker. And they're going to hear you. If you're like talking vitriol about sex work, they're going to hear that and they're going to feel, it might make them feel bad. It might make them not trust you. It might make them feel some kind of way. So we're just people that are doing a job. And that's pretty much what I want to say.
Valentine.
I would say, well, just going back to earlier. So I'm a sex worker of color. This light is hard to tell, but I'm Black. I've also been inside because I had COVID. So I've just been inside for like 11 months. It's fine. But we have to understand that there are degrees of privilege within sex work itself. And it's, you know, it's just a microcosm of the world that we live in, the society that we live in. So there are a lot of there are a lot of systems of oppression at work within our industry, with the way we're viewed by clients or the way we're targeted by people who hate sex work, who tend to hate, certain types of sex workers more. So, if you're a trans sex worker, you're likely to have a harder fucking time, and get a lot more shit. So even if you're doing well, like if you're getting a lot of people reaching out wanting to book you or whatever, or like subscribing to your shit online or whatever it is that you do, there are probably, if you're making the same amount as like a white cis slender woman who is doing the same thing and you're making the same amount, your inbox is going to be like way more of a fucking hellhole than that slender white woman. So it's really important that, we as sex workers even check our privilege. I know that I have a shit ton of skin privilege, and I have a lot of various privileges. Like I am very housing secure and everything like that. So I'm very fortunate, and not everyone is. And some people are more fortunate at some parts of their career than other times. So I guess keeping that in mind, whether you are outside or inside the community, because we have a lot of infighting about some of this stuff because a lot of people don't realize the power that they hold in their privilege and they wield it irresponsibly, unfortunately.
Thank you so much for that. Molly, what do you have? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, going off of what Delphine and Kroll both said, like, yeah, sex workers are everywhere. Sex work is work. And yeah, there's a lot of like privilege and intersectionality within sex work, the same way there is in real life, like white cis men are at the top. And it's like, then, like marginalized people of color, trans people are like struggle the most. So it's like there's a lot of this whole like lateral whorephobia within the sex work community where there's like the thin, white, high-end type of people, and then like the street workers, and just that we all just want the same thing. We all just want to survive in a bullshit capitalistic society, and we're all just doing our best.
And lastly, India, got for us.
Yes, I think everyone pretty much touched on like the privilege part, but I would just say support your sex workers, listen to your sex workers. Like Delphina said, they're like, you probably know one, so just be very careful with your verbiage. And don't let anyone police your body. If you are a sex worker, don't let anyone police your body or make you feel bad about yourself, or the price, because ultimately it is a job. And yeah, so.
Yeah.
And with that being said, y'all, thank you so much. I really appreciated this conversation. And I'm pretty sure that there are so many folks that also appreciate the conversation and the nuances behind it. If you are a sex worker, or if you're somebody who is seeking or aspiring to be a sex worker and this helped you out, then thank me, bitch. But if you are not, then I hope that you were able to check some of your biases at the door, as we all are just simply looking for ways in order to and maneuver through this bullshit ass cis het normative fucking society that we call life, and do it in a way that we can maintain ourselves, right, in this capitalistic society. We all like nice things. We all like to be able to have housing security and go and do whatever we want to do. And the way that we, finance that is up to us. And so I hope that by listening to these folks come and give their opinions about this, and actually speak about their lives, humanizes the idea of sex work to you, as it has definitely helped me to humanize things. And on top of that, it helps you to, one, not feel ashamed about your need for engaging with sex workers or your need to be a sex worker. But like I say this time and every time, y'all, I hope that y'all learned something this week. Peace, love, and hope. And I will see y'all on the next episode of Can We Talk with Hope Giselle. Bye.